Welcome, dear colleagues in the arts field, colleagues in the research field, dear donors, dear founders. They're all here together, and that was exactly what I meant when we talked about this first day of Arts Philanthropy. We hope there will follow more. Arts Philanthropy in Europe, that's my topic for you today. Trends and developments. That's a very big title, and I'm afraid I can only tell you a little part of that, and the rest is research to be done. But I'm very confident after this morning, with the wonderful international research consortium that we had together, that we will make good progress with that. So I hope to tell you more in 2 more years. My introduction is about the public debate about financing the arts. As you may know, that is something I publish about in newspapers sometimes, and I also published a book about that already. The interesting thing is that philanthropy seems a fairly new phenomenon for European arts institutions after World War II, at least. But now it is because before it wasn't rare at all. It was common use actually. But now it's quickly on the rise, since many European countries recently cut down substantially on the arts budgets. As you may know, that is not only the case in the Netherlands. When I published this book, The New Patron, Art and the Return of Private Money, it seems an ominous title now, it was the spring of 2008, and all seemed well. Corporate sponsorship for the arts was flourishing in the Netherlands. Cultural entrepreneurship by arts organizations was developing quite well. But then the recession hit, followed soon by severe budget cuttings by our national government. In 2011, funding was slashed abruptly by 150 million euro, dropping to 200 million a year since 2013 and still continuing. That is 25% of the original arts budget, once amounting to 800 million. Adding to this blow, regional and municipal governments followed, cutting their budgets between 10 and 20%, and more may come. Sadly, the public subsidy system had not encouraged arts institutions to build up reserves, since grants needed to be spent in full each year. Without serious endowment funds, many organizations were left without reserves to manage the transition. Arts organizations, therefore, had to speed up their fundraising, especially from private parties. And being in a hurry, as all fundraisers in the room know, is not a wise policy towards potential donors. Rushing and pushing for gifts is not the way to develop long-term relationships with people. It signals short-term urgency. In Dutch, I sometimes say, het mecenaat is geen pinautomaat. It means a donor is not a cash machine. Money is not provided by them on demand. The message that these government cuts communicates, sadly, are not helpful either. The impression may be that art is not worth supporting, that it is elitist, supplementary. The lack of recognition for the autonomous values of art, the issue of legitimizing the expenses for art, is a serious threat to the cultural sector, and we should take it seriously. Art is a collective good and needs to be protected and advocated as such. And shortage of money is not an attractive proposition when it comes to convincing people to give. Let us not forget that people already paid their taxes and, as art lovers, bought entrance tickets for museums or theaters or concert halls. So what is the research focus of the Fellowship for Arts Philanthropy? to close the public debate for the moment, because we go back to that all afternoon and especially in the panel later. That's where my research project comes in. Utrecht University offered me the opportunity, privately paid, to follow my previous research, privately funded fellowship for arts philanthropy. Practice what you preach, right? The research assignment is bridge the gap between arts and academia. Provide empirical research that may be helpful for the arts sector in coping with a new reality and at the same time preserve her values. The connection between donors, arts organizations and researchers is unusual, but it is important. We should cooperate, work together in formulating appealing propositions for current art lovers, but also for new groups, young people who have different ways of enjoying art, ethnical groups who have not yet found their way to the more classical art forms, or traditional institutions. So what is the definition of arts philanthropy that I use in my research project? Oh, I can do that myself. Can you do it? I'm not good at this, sorry. I just talk on. My definition, the definition I use, because of course you can give a lot of definitions, is that I focus on, since that is the issue at the moment, donating money and or art objects, which is of course only relevant for museums. That the donation is being done by citizens, individuals, but not only on their own, but also in collective giving circles, friend circles. I also look at founders of endowed and designated foundations. Main beneficiaries, the main beneficiaries that I study are arts organizations, and not so much artists or art students. Visual and performing arts institutions, museums, concert halls, theaters. Voluntary work is not or not yet included in this research project. There's a special research place for that in Rotterdam at Erasmus University. So I specialize in qualitative research, motivational research, focused on giving behavior and motivation of donors, potential donors. To put it shortly, why do people give? And also, why do they not or not yet give? As I said, the Netherlands are not the only country that faces a transition in arts funding, parallel to a transition in the welfare state, it seems, a system change. The way we deal with it is influenced by the roles different European countries allocate to civil society. Therefore, it is useful for the research project to look at neighboring countries. Public-private partnerships, typical for the Rhine model countries, are developed on a small scale in the Netherlands by putting designated foundations under the umbrella of art institutions or foundations like the Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds. Anglo-Saxon trusts are supposed to form a counterweight against government arts policy, but develop parallel strategies as well. The United Kingdom has experienced severe budget cuts in practically all non-profit sectors long before us, going back to the Thatcher era. Denmark is another example. We had a Danish researcher here this morning. But even in centralistic France, which still has state museums, the government is slicing art budgets every year, as Mrs. Ina Giscard d'Estaing will shortly tell you. This means that citizens have to step up and pay more according to politics. The so-called civil society, therefore, is in danger of being an instrument of a calculating government. And philanthropy is part of that civil society. This morning we had a seminar for academic researchers, as has been said, One of the themes was instrumentalization of civic giving. And that is something as a sector that we should really be careful of. Art is not meant to be an instrument for other sectors. Art should not let itself be positioned in a place where it has to legitimize itself all the time. It is, we talked about, for instance, Alzheimer projects in museums, which is wonderful, but not exclusively paid out of the arts budgets. Why should art legitimize its societal role all the time? So we actually have a double problem. We have this transition, which is money-driven, but we also have a value crisis, and we have to deal with that as a sector. I talked about a few European countries, and I must add to that I do not make comparisons with the United States. I will be short about that, but it's a thing that bothers me a lot in discussions. It is not fair to do so. The United States never had a welfare state. So citizens have a very different relationship with the government and the state. This implies a very different attitude towards civil responsibility and donating. In Europe, the key question is if donors for the arts are willing to compensate for gaps in government funding, or if they prefer to set their own agenda. For which goals, what case of support do they want to make an extra contribution, a donation, and for which ones they do not want to be held responsible? It is also up to the art sector to have this debate, to have this clear, to put it in a debate and really make clear definitions about that. So I'll take you in a short round about what we already know about the philanthropic behavior of European citizens. There is quite some quantitative research being done, which is important for the sector, and I'll show you some of it. This is, what you see here is the arts, the Charities Aid Foundation World Giving Index says the UK is the #1 in Europe, with 67 to 69% of the citizens giving a donation every now and then. This could be anything from 10 euros up to major amounts. The Netherlands follows closely, often second or third, about 66%. That is, 2/3 of the population is willing to give. This is important. The awareness and what is called the climate of giving is important. So that is quite high in the Netherlands. What else do we know? Oh no, sorry, I wasn't finished with it, right. No, I'll quit that because I didn't get that right, Pamela. Huh? We go to the next one. Figures are not easy for a qualitative researcher, so I depend highly on my colleagues who are much more skilled there. According to Geven in Nederland at VU University in Amsterdam, the total amount donated to culture in 2013, that are the latest data at the moment, the next ones will come this spring, is 281 million euro. And how is this divided between foundations, corporations, lotteries, and private persons? That I think is interesting, because households, it is claimed, give 60 million of that amount. So that is almost 25%, which I think is substantial. We are always talking about the lotteries, and they're very, very important. Sigrid van Aken will be on we're happy to have her at the panel discussion today. The director of also the Bank Giro Loterij for the arts. But households are not to be neglected. But the sad part, of course, is that donations have fallen between 2011 and 2013. That was when the crisis actually hit the Netherlands, and people just got more careful and, you know, looked how things were going and were more reserved to give. I expect, and I hear that from the arts sector as well, that donations will have proven to have risen after 2013, since the Dutch economy is sort of back on its track. Alas, it is not specified to whom or in what way these donations were given. That may come. It takes a lot of work. It's not easy to research. But it's interesting to see that average amounts are not very high, the average amount of a donation. And that seems to signal that, and that's interesting for the arts sector, especially I think that membership fees, friend circles are very important in the donor field. Okay, I told you these quantitative data, they are relevant, very important, but of course they cannot explain every question about giving. They offer bits of the puzzle, but not the complete picture. What I try to add here is qualitative data. They are not abundantly available, not in the Netherlands, but also not in France or Germany. The UK seems to do best, Kathy, and Kathy Ferraro will talk about that later this afternoon. It may be wise for the arts sector to seek more cooperation with research projects, so fundraising campaigns are not based on assumptions, but on analysis and fact-finding. This is no luxury, since over-asking is a serious threat to effective fundraising. The Netherlands are a small country, and the circle of donors is not very wide. Qualitative research, therefore, can be valuable help. Methods of motivational research I apply in this project are in-depth interviews, person-to-person with individual donors and founders of foundations, by asking them why they give and for which goals they want to give and for which they refuse to give. And I also do surveys among circles of young donors, friend circles, and by listening to them in focus groups. I also talk with people who quit these giving circles and ask them why. What were your expectations? Were you disappointed, or was there a change in your life, or what happened? And I'm very fortunate that arts organizations actually provide me with the context to do this research. My focus then for the coming years is the potential game changer, motivation and giving behavior of younger European donors and founders for the arts. Stepping in the current transition in arts funding, new private players may prove to be those game changers. And I'll show you some of the results we already have, but we're very much in the process, so this is only a slice of it. We talked to members of Club Foam. Club Foam is the photography museum in Amsterdam. They have a young public, I think the average visitor is 33 years old. And the members of the Giving Circle are about the same age. It's the maximum age is 40 years. And we did a survey, we talked to them, we talked to focus groups, we will talk to focus groups, and we also talked with people who quit, which is interesting. What is the profile that we see here? They pay, by the way, 450 euro for a membership a year. I think that is substantial for younger people. And what is interesting is that 300 euro of that amount directly goes to the arts organization, and the 150 is earmarked for the activities of Club Foam itself. 90% of its members has academic or high education. Probably not very surprising. I'm sure that most of the fundraisers in the room think no big deal. That's what we are experiencing in the field. It's true. Many art lovers are highly educated. That doesn't mean they have a high income. That's a very different discussion. 70% says main reason for joining is learning, which I think is very interesting. We're now looking into the Young Patron Circle of National Opera and Ballet. Stefanie van Rappard will later go into that. And learning is a very important part of your program as well. Maybe even more so with a traditional art form as the opera is perceived. But learning is very important. We think social issues are important for joining a give or think circle. We can understand that younger people join because it may be interesting for their career. But I'm not sure as a sector we're aware that people want to spend their free time wisely. They want several aspects at the same time being served. 48% requires more information about the impact of their financial support. I think that is a phenomenon that you may also know. People are more critical. What are you actually doing with my donation? Where is it going? What difference does it make? But the interesting part, on the other hand, is if I talked to the ambassadors of the Club Foam, and then I asked them, do you know which percentage goes to the arts organization and which is for your own activities? And quite a lot of them said, I have no idea. So this is what you step on when you do motivational research. People think they want more information about the impact, and they mean it. I mean, that's a serious thing for them. On the other hand, if you ask them, did you inform yourself about it? They say, I have no idea. 26% also contributes to other arts organizations. We will look into that more in the process of the research, because what does this mean? Do they have parallel memberships, or do they shop and hop and go to different arts organizations every year? And 21%, I think, is interesting because it's a young group, also gives to charities. So, as I said, we will look to other patrons of young circles, young donor circles as well, because every bigger arts organization in the Netherlands now has such a circle, and that may be something to we come to that maybe something to look into, because museums next door who all have their own circle. Yeah, I'm not sure how long this will hold. For instance, Mrs. Giscard d'Estaing, who is joining me in a minute, she told me that the Louvre has difficulty in moving younger donors to higher, older circles, 40 plus. They're 40, they should step over to the next circle, 40 plus, and they refuse because they're comfortable in their social surroundings at these circles, and they're also not very willing to pay the higher fee. So that's an interesting thing that you see in the real, with empirical research. You can have very interesting theories, but about generational management, etc. But this is how it works in practice. Yeah, right. Due to the ongoing individualization of giving, donors tend to build their own foundation or designated trust, and this may be at the cost of membership, collective philanthropy at arts institutions. We have to look in that as well. That is, I think, my next slide. I did in person-to-person interviews with 12 founders of big endowed foundations. Foundations who have a budget up to from $1 million up, like Turing Foundation, very well known in the Netherlands, Dura Kunstfonds, Adessium Foundation. And this is the profile that up till now we can draw from these founders. Young means here under 50 years old, which is quite young in the foundation field. The profile is they're mainly business people, entrepreneurs. They have a strong personal involvement. They are proactive. They do not like to wait passively for applicants, but they want to initiate. They strive for social impact investment, which is another discussion, but that is, they do not want to look upon their contributions as pure donations, but they see it as a cycle, as a return in investment. And they have a close involvement with beneficiaries and partners. They call them partners favorably. They strive for multi-annual partnerships, and they are very much internationally focused, and their area of activity is so as well. These foundations, the big endowed foundations, are becoming more and more important since European governments do not take care of the social field as it used to. And gaps have fallen in, for instance, healthcare and poverty reduction. Key question here is, if donors for the arts are willing to compensate for gaps in government funding, or if they prefer to set their own agenda. Mr. Roelof Prins, Director of Foundation de Steenbergen in Rotterdam, will tell us later today about the initiating role of this large endowed foundation and its public-private partnership with the City Council of Rotterdam, among other projects for the collection building of Museum Boijmans. So where are we going? There's a lot about donor behavior that we have not researched extensively yet, and that also in the field we simply do not know. Which are trends in giving behavior in the Netherlands and the neighboring countries? New strategies and trends seem necessary for the arts sector to cope with the new reality. The urgency to develop new ways of funding, and especially convincing private art lovers to contribute. As we know, corporate sponsorship has fallen substantially in the arts sector, and it isn't likely to recover at the level it had before 2008. Will individual giving continue to set the agenda, or will people unite on a local level, as neighborhood initiatives and foundations already seem to indicate? And how do we commit young people who do not aspire long-term commitment, but do engage on a no-strings-attached basis? Roy Kremers, the founder of a crowdfunding platform exclusively aimed at financing arts projects for the kunst, will shed some light on that later today. Also, the reciprocity of giving is an interesting topic for motivational research. What do people expect? Not seldom different things than the ones arts institutions think they expect. Donors who are truly altruistic may be offended by a list of discount offers. We have to be careful not to treat philanthropists as consumers, running the risk that they are triggered to behave like one. Expectation management may prove an interesting field, and the easiest way to learn more about expectations is to ask donors themselves. Arjo Klamer at the panel discussion will talk about that. The urgency of formulating values that appeal to donors in the long term and to new generations as well. So at the end of the day, although we have a lot of new tools at our disposal to communicate with visitors of our museums and theaters, you know them all: Facebook, Twitter, newsletters, YouTube videos. Old-fashioned person-to-person contact may prove to be the most effective way for learning more about potential donors and donors. Not fundraising itself, getting people to make an incidental donation, therefore seems to be the main challenge, but relationship management, keeping people committed and connected for a longer period of time. The good news is, I'm finishing now, sorry.
That's great, Renee.
Compared to the general philanthropic institutions, the arts have an advantage, an immense advantage. They can offer events. They can actually receive their donors, exhibitions, concerts, theater performance, at which they can actually meet these donors and bond with them. So let's start today. Donors, arts organizations, and researchers in one room. Wow. If we really are interested in each other's perceptions, we make progress. This is not about money. Today we talk about engagement, commitment, love for art. We need to protect it, and we need to protect our donors and supporters for art's sake. Thank you.